Why do we keep making excuses for the women in our lives who consistently fail to meet our needs? Think about it. How many times have you found yourself rationalizing her behavior, convincing yourself that she's just busy or she's going through something right now? We've all been there, that place where we're constantly giving second chances, where we're always the one making the effort, where we're left wondering if we're asking for too much or if we're simply not worth the effort. It's a painful cycle that leaves us feeling confused, resentful, and completely alone. But what if I told you that making excuses for her isn't actually helping either of you? What if those well-intentioned justifications are actually preventing both of you from growing into the people and the couple you could be? Today, I want to talk about why we make excuses for the women in our lives, why that pattern is so destructive, and most importantly, what you can do instead to create the kind of relationship where both people show up fully. Let's be honest with ourselves for a moment. When she consistently doesn't text back, when she cancels plans at the last minute, when she seems emotionally distant, we have a choice. We can either confront the reality of her behavior, or we can create a story that makes it easier for us to accept. And most of us choose the story. Why? Because it feels safer. Because facing the truth might mean facing rejection. Because acknowledging her lack of effort might force us to make difficult decisions we're not ready to make. The problem is that this pattern of excuse-making creates a relationship built on fantasy rather than reality. You're not relating to the actual person in front of you. You're relating to the version of her that exists in your mind, the version that would never intentionally hurt you, the version that surely has good reasons for her actions. But here's what's really happening when you make excuses for her behavior. You're teaching her that she doesn't need to step up. You're creating a dynamic where your needs don't matter, where her convenience trumps your feelings, where the relationship can function just fine without her full participation. And let me tell you something important. She knows. On some level, she knows she's not giving her best, and your excuses are allowing her to avoid that uncomfortable truth. When you consistently make excuses for someone, you're not actually showing love. You're showing fear. Fear of conflict, fear of loss, fear of being alone. And relationships built on fear never reach their full potential. But there's another way. A way that honors both yourself and her. A way that creates space for growth rather than stagnation. A way that might feel terrifying at first, but leads to something far more authentic and fulfilling. It starts with a fundamental shift in how you approach the relationship. Instead of making excuses for her behavior, you need to hold her accountable to the same standards you would hold anyone else who matters in your life. This isn't about punishment or control. It's about respect for yourself and for her. It's about believing that she's capable of more and refusing to settle for less. It's about loving the real person in front of you, not the idealized version you've created in your mind. So, what does this look like in practice? First, you need to get brutally honest with yourself. What patterns have you been excusing? What needs have you been denying? What reality have you been avoiding? This isn't about blaming her or yourself. It's about seeing clearly. Once you've identified the patterns, you need to communicate your expectations directly. Not as demands, not as ultimatums, but as honest expressions of what you need from a partner. When you consistently cancel our plans last minute, I feel unimportant to you. I need reliability in my relationships. Now, here's where most men go wrong. They either avoid these conversations entirely, or they approach them with such anger and resentment that they create defensiveness rather than understanding. The key is to speak from a place of self-respect rather than desperation or rage. And then comes the hardest part. You have to be willing to enforce boundaries. If you say that reliability matters to you, but you continue to accept unreliable behavior without consequence, nothing will change. Your actions need to align with your words. This might mean stepping back from the relationship. It might mean becoming less available yourself. It might mean explicitly stating, I care about you, but I'm not willing to continue in a relationship where I don't feel valued. These moments require tremendous courage. They require facing your fears of loss and rejection. They require trusting that either she will rise to meet you or you will eventually find someone who will. But here's what happens when you stop making excuses for her and start holding her to a higher standard. You give her the opportunity to grow. You see, most women don't actually want a partner who will accept their worst behavior. They want someone who sees their potential and encourages them to live up to it. When you stop making excuses, you're essentially saying, I believe you're capable of more than this. I believe in your strength, your awareness, your ability to show up fully in this relationship. That's not criticism. That's profound respect. And yes, there's a risk. She might not step up. She might choose to walk away rather than face these truths. But if that happens, you need to ask yourself, was that really the relationship you wanted? One where your needs were optional, where your feelings were secondary, where your partner wasn't willing to grow with you? I've seen this transformation happen countless times. Men who finally stopped making excuses, who finally stood firmly in their worth, who finally communicated their needs without apology, and watched as their partners responded not with resistance, but with relief. Relief that they could finally stop hiding. Relief that they could finally be held to a higher standard. Relief that they could finally be in a relationship built on truth rather than comfort. Because here's something we often forget. Comfort and growth rarely coexist. The most fulfilling relationships aren't the ones where everything is easy. They're the ones where both people continually challenge each other to become better versions of themselves. So how do you actually implement this approach? Start by examining your own role in the dynamic. Are you showing up fully yourself? Are you being the kind of partner you expect her to be? Change begins with you, and you'll have much more credibility if you're holding yourself to the same standards you expect from her. Then, have that conversation, but approach it with compassion rather than accusation. I've noticed a pattern in our relationship, and I think we both deserve more. I want us to talk about how we can show up better for each other. Be specific about the behaviors that aren't working, but focus more on how they make you feel rather than attacking her character. There's a world of difference between you're selfish and inconsiderate and when you're constantly on your phone when we're together, I feel disconnected from you. Invite her perspective and really listen. There might be reasons for her behavior that you haven't considered. This isn't about making excuses. It's about understanding the full picture so you can address the real issues. Set clear, reasonable expectations for moving forward. What specific changes would make you feel more valued in the relationship? What timeline seems fair? What support might she need to make these changes? And then, this is crucial, follow through. If nothing changes, despite your conversations, despite your clarity, despite your compassion, you need to be willing to walk away, not as a manipulation tactic, but as an act of self-respect. Remember that your worth isn't determined by her response. If she chooses not to step up, that's not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of her limitations at this moment in her life. The most powerful thing you can do in any relationship is to know your worth and act accordingly. When you truly believe you deserve a partner who shows up fully, who communicates honestly, who makes consistent effort, you'll stop accepting anything less. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you stop needing her to validate your worth, when you stop making excuses for behavior that hurts you, when you become willing to walk away rather than compromise your standards, that's when she becomes most likely to step up. Because strength is attractive, self-respect is attractive, clarity is attractive, and a man who knows his worth without arrogance or aggression is nearly irresistible. So stop making excuses for her. Stop pretending that her half-hearted effort is enough. Stop convincing yourself that this is as good as it gets. Believe in her capacity to be more. Believe in your right to expect more. And most importantly, believe in the possibility of a relationship where neither of you has to make excuses for the other, because you're both showing up fully, both growing together, both creating something extraordinary. It won't be easy. Growth never is. But ask yourself, would you rather have the comfortable illusion of connection or the sometimes challenging but infinitely more rewarding reality of true partnership? The choice is yours. And so is the power to transform your relationship, not by controlling her, not by changing her, but by refusing to accept less than you deserve and inviting her to join you in creating something better.